Welcome to Mistakes Were Made. Hey y'all, producer Jessica here. Just popping into your feed to say, I don't know if you noticed when our last guest, Reagan Jackson, mentioned her dating coach, but I think Sarah and Alex and I all said, dating coach? Tell us more. And we actually had such a great side conversation about it that we are putting it into this little mini extra special bonus episode for you. So please enjoy.
So yeah, tell us about the dating coach. And I guess I have specific questions around that inspired by what you just said. Like my sort of knee-jerk instinct, or when you said that, I was just like, oh, isn't everybody's subconscious goal in romantic life affirming their self-worth? And I don't know that that's actually true for everybody else. So that's interesting. Long-winded way of saying, how did you set your goals when you first connected with the dating coach? Is that one of the things they asked you to do, or were they sort of assumed and baked in?
No, actually, yeah, he's asked me to do a lot of reflection on what do I like? What do I not like? What works for me? All the things. So backing up, it was my 45th birthday and I celebrated a whole season. I had crazy Leo season experience, which was wonderful. And during that time, I was on Instagram and I saw this post by this man named Anwar White. And he identified himself as a dating coach who'd been working particularly with Black and brown women for 14, 15 years. And he had a map of places where he's hey, sometimes you don't get your shine. And here in the States, here are different countries and different cities and different countries where you can go and just meet men who will be all about you. And he runs tours. So of course, this is right up my alley. I'm ooh, vacation? What?
Yeah.
I get to go on vacation and meet bae. I love it.
And you're talking about because of racism, basically.
Oh,
why that would be the case in some places and not other places.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, but not just racism. We're intersectional people, so we have intersectional problems. And racism, sexism, classism, the ways in which I have been socialized as a Black woman specifically, there was such a stigma. Y'all remember the welfare queens and all the Republicans putting all that up as Black women, you're so terrible, So the kind of lashback has been, I think I was really socialized to be very respectable. So I was thinking about this. Sarah and I feel we have these conversations about being a good girl or being a bad girl or whatever. And we kind of are diametrically opposed at times.
We are.
Spoiler alert, I'm a good girl. No. I mean, actually, neither one of us are.
Most of the time, except for when you don't want to be.
Well, but also neither one of us are either all good or all bad. We don't live in binary existence. We just don't. Yeah. But what I will say is I was taught to deprioritize romance and love, and that was something that was going to come later after I got my degrees and my bag and my house and my, I had priorities. And so there's kind of this thing where, there's these teenage moms or, people look down at them. And now it's those teenage moms have kids and most of them are married and most of them have all the things. They just went about it in a different timeline. But yeah, I don't think I realized how fully I had invested in respectability politics in this specific way.
Yeah.
Mostly because I'm pretty uninvested in them in a lot of other ways.
Right. Yeah.
But then, you wake up and you're 45 and you're there's no kid, there's no husband. I'm financially stable. I have my own house. I have a great career. And all of that took strategy and work. And that strategy and work that I have not put into my love life. And so that was the second thing I saw with Anwar. I subscribed to him after that video post, and he had posted something else saying something girl, you are probably an overachiever, in those moments when he's talking to you directly. You're an overachiever. You do this, you do that, you do that. He's you have a strategy for everything else in your life. What is your love life strategy?
Interesting. Yeah.
And I was I don't know. He's coming, right? That's it. That's the strategy. I just sit here and wait until dude shows up. That's not working.
Right. And if you had that about any other realm of your life, like economics or whatever,
no, and I also just
it would be laughable for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like it would. Exactly that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what hooked me. Like, and then I looked and saw how much it was, and I was like, ooh, I don't know. And then
Anwar has a strategy.
Anwar has a strategy. Anwar is very gainfully employed. Let me put it to you that way. But then he ran into one of my best friends, Anastasia, and Naakua happened to be in a bar in Brooklyn. And even though Anwar lives in Montreal, he was in Brooklyn doing a pop-up session with women at that bar. So he left me a voice message like on my phone where he like basically taunted me into being a part of this program. So like it was one of those things where I do pay attention to signs and intuition. And I was like, oh, I'm actually supposed to work with this person because how else would he have been able to get to me so directly?
Yeah.
Like this is just rando on the internet who then suddenly is leaving me a voice memo. And it's been amazing.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that the way you are talking about dating and your experience with dating has changed so dramatically.
Yes, because it's not a dumpster fire.
or maybe there are like some wastebasket fires, but they like stay wastebaskets. And I wanted to get into that, but I maybe wanted to point out and just like some resonance with what you said before I forget. For different reasons, I also was always really worried about having the professional life that I wanted, being able to get it, being able to figure out how to get it, and always worrying that it was like a little out of reach for me. And I was like always just going to be like, ugh. And in my 20s, I remember like very consciously being like, I'm not going down the road that these other young women I know are going down. I am not going to date a ton. I'm not going to have sex with a ton of men. At that time, I also was not like out to myself completely as queer, which probably influenced this some too, because I think had I been dating more dynamically and actively, that would have been something that I also would have had to grapple with and encounter, and I didn't want to. And like there was this equation in my mind where I was like, if I promise not to be like wild in that area of my life, then I'm going to get to be able to be like wild and get these like professional goals that I have set for myself, which seem out of reach. And I think I am very in love with you, Alex. I was very in love with you the moment that I met you.
Aww.
And deciding to was honestly the best decision of my life. And I think it was strategic in that way too, where I was like, you know, it kind of was a way to be traditional in one area of my life and to feel like anchored and a little safer and like I wouldn't have to explore myself in that realm. So just reminded me of that feeling as I was listening to you talk about the equations inside of you.
Well, and I'd like these equations to be externalized. I've been really thinking about this in the context of the youth I work with, and wondering like, what would it have been like if at 16 somebody like talked to me about dating strategies? Also just for self-preservation. Like there's a lot of different men that I would have never connected with or wouldn't have connected as deeply with them because I would have had more filters and more like barriers.
Yeah.
And then also like today I was like listening to there's a course curriculum or whatever. So I was listening to the module on exclusivity and thinking, how many times did I just kind of go out with somebody for 3 or 4 times? And then I found out we were girlfriend, boyfriend because he introduced me as such, not because we had any kind of agreement or conversation and I feel like so much of dating and love has been that where you're just supposed to fall into it. And then it's like, okay, but then what happens when you don't? Or you fall into it, but it's like the exact wrong thing with the wrong person.
That's that like built-in escalator, right?
Yeah.
You just get on without intentionally like deciding to. It just happens.
And speaking of externalizing things, one of the things I've noticed about the way you're talking about dating since working with a dating coach is externalizing the power dynamics. You talk about them so directly, not just with like money on a date, but with the way you communicate, with the language that you use, with like so maybe you could extrapolate a little on that.
Yeah. Well, one, I'm not about to be in a power struggle with some man. So we'll just be clear on that. And I feel like now that I have more of a framework for how I'm choosing to engage with people, like it's been really helpful for me to see when that's beginning to happen. Like things like I was supposed to go out on a date with a guy this week, and he was already like a bit beyond my boundaries around some things, to a point where I was like, hey, when we meet, like, here's what I need around consent, like in terms of physical touch. Like when we first meet, do not kiss me. Because he's, very physical in his like approach to like talking to me or whatever, very sexual. And I'm like, like you're still a stranger from the internet. Like I want to be clear, like what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. And he was very kind of Pepe Le Pew about it in a way where I was like,
I don't know what that means. You'll have to explain.
You don't know what you haven't been Pepe Le Pew?
What do you want? Pepe Le Pew? Oh, okay, like aggressive.
The rape culture mascot of our generation.
Okay. Yeah, that guy.
Okay.
Like,
He's raping the cat. Got it. Sorry. Yeah.
Where when I'm like bringing up consent and like what's going to make me feel comfortable when we go on this date, and he's like basically like, wait, so I have to ask to kiss you? And I'm like, not only do you have to ask, you also have to be given permission.
Right.
Because I might say no.
Yeah.
And then I expect you to not kiss me. And he was like, it was very confusing to him. And he made some comment like, oh, I don't know, like, how can I control my lips? And I was like,
Ew.
Yeah. So I was already like about to block him. Like I was, that was about to be on the way out. But then on the day of the date, he wanted to change the location of the date to be more convenient for him. Also knowing that like I had to go to work right after the date, and where I was working was like in the South End. And he's like, no, but like come meet me in Capitol Hill. And I was like, pulled the cord and was like, nope, I'm actually not going on this date.
Yeah, that does sound like power struggle stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not actually gonna struggle. There's no struggle. I understand what my boundaries are now.
Well, and like, I feel like this is making me think about how so many relationships between men and women are, or like we were talking about this earlier, I think, just like power is like always there, right?
Oh,
it's like always going to be a dynamic in like romantic relationships, especially across gender, I would imagine.
And race and class. And,
sure.
Yeah.
No, all the things.
Yeah, and all the things. But yeah.
But especially gender, probably. So you can't just pretend it's not there, but you do have to acknowledge it and like establish a like container of consent and know that you're doing that. Like there's like every relationship I have with a woman has like power play inside of it, but it's like acknowledged and like it's not like right out the gate. I'm like trying to do that with people who haven't already like opted into it. Like you build a bunch of trust and then you can do that. You know what I mean?
Are you talking about sex?
Rare.
Yeah, sex or like the money stuff, like the thing you were talking about with money earlier. Like as I was thinking about that, like usually there would be like we would like split everything or have everything be completely like not completely, but like vaguely even until it got to the point that like there was enough trust around it that it's like okay for me to pay for stuff a little bit more often or to like, have a gesture.
Yeah.
But it's not but that's like after we've kind of already established the like rapport and the trust.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this is about that. And realizing that everyone comes with wildly different expectations of what's going to happen when you go on a date. And so like, for me, part of what has felt empowering is like, just getting really clear on like what I'm bringing to the date, what my expectations are of the date, what I'm going to communicate beforehand, what I'm going to communicate during, like even just knowing what the date is going to be, like it's just different. And so what I found is like, also I see things that maybe are problematic a lot sooner and filter them out. So once by the time I'm getting to a physical date, like when I actually go on these physical dates, they're actually great. Like I've been going on really good dates in a way, whereas before it felt like way more of like a roll the dice. Like I don't know who this person is or how they're going to show up or what they're going to expect. But like kind of going back to Alex's question around like power dynamics, a thing that comes up for me that has been really helpful in my work with Anwar has been the way that he names the ways in which particularly Black women have been marginalized on the dating market. So
yeah. And that's what was my racism question before, actually, was about that. I think you took it in another direction. But
well, I mean, it's all there, right? Yeah. Like all the things are there. But I think like going on a date, I wonder at times, like what is Sarah's expectation? Like maybe you feel uncomfortable with a man paying for you, but is there an expectation? Like when more men meet you, are they like automatically assuming they're going to pay for you and that's the way that they're going to treat you? Versus like with me, are they assuming they're going to pay for me or not? And what I've found, like what I've been like just finding anecdotally is like, I don't necessarily love the way that Black women are treated when we're dating. So again, like having these standards, like for me, it's not even about the money. Like, yeah, I can buy my own chicken sandwich, like whatever. Like it's not about that. It's about, I need to be dating men who are willing to invest in me, their time, their energy, their finances, like, and also like investing into wanting to make me feel comfortable. Because like that's what's gonna like get us to a place where we can be vulnerable and have conversation and like really get to know each other. Yeah. But like realizing like I haven't even had that level of safety in all my previous dating experiences. And that's why it doesn't work. It has not worked. I think one of the reasons. There's lots of reasons. But like that fundamentally has been, I think, one of the biggest shifts for me is just feeling more comfortable, more at ease. I'm quicker on my boundaries, but in ways that are like, oh, I would prefer this, or I don't, I would prefer not to do that. And then I'm not dictating how the man behaves, but I'm responding accordingly, according to my boundary, not necessarily to what they want me to do or not do. If that makes sense.
Like it's more, the important thing is that you know what the boundary is.
Yeah. So he can respect it or not respect it. But, I know what to do. And if I see, oh, this is a man that doesn't pay attention to my boundaries, doesn't respect that, it wants me to like do things that are uncomfortable or inconvenient for me, that's not my dude.
Right. Yeah. And they're probably not doing that because of the convenience. They're probably doing it to exert power over you to establish that pattern in the relationship so that they can continue to do it.
Men distinguish between what is their power or what is convenient to them.
They should.
They should, but I don't think they
are
think
capable
about
of it.
Yes, men are capable of this. And a lot of men do not even think about it. It wouldn't occur to them.
Yeah.
It's just more like, well, it's convenient for me. So why wouldn't you acquiesce to my convenience? Like it's very audacious.
And I think you're right to say that the experience I have as a white woman is different in that respect. I mean, white women, we're just like overvalued sexually. And that is reflected in the way people pursue us, for sure. I also have not ever really had the experience of dating for a life partner. And so just as I was like listening to you talk, I was like, I don't really know how men would date me with that in mind. I don't know.
You're saying maybe in the way that they show up in the dates themselves? I wouldn't imagine that it makes that big of a difference. I mean, or I guess like everything that you're saying about this intentionality is making me think about like how this is one of the things that I like and appreciate about polyamory is that you have a lot of space to like explore these things and like learn about yourself and other people and society or whatever in like an environment that maybe is maybe it's lower stakes if you're not searching for a life partner.
I don't know. Maybe the dynamics are, I'm just thinking about the way dudes show up and that question of like, do they assume they'll pay for me? I don't know about that, in part because I often will get in front of things like that. When you were talking about telling a guy that he had to ask before he kissed you, I have not been on a date with a man where I am the one who asks if we should kiss. I mean, I always am. Yeah. Like, I think this is making me realize that I think I'm actually pretty prickly as a person to date, and especially in the beginning. And I am the person like, they'll go to the bathroom and I will put down a card to pay for the meal, like.
Trump.
Yeah, but I'm just like, this is all me.
Yeah, that's like that's
no
the Middle
power
East
over
shit.
me, right?
Actually, I know where you learned that.
And so I'm like, but I think like the experience I often have with men is that they're like, we're going to kind of do and say whatever we have to and can to fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I am just like so aware of like that whole arc and intention, and that there's like a, this sounds really cynical. And if people want to press against this and tell me that I'm wrong and that I'm being overly cautious, I'll hear it. But I just don't want any of that. I'm like, don't fucking run any of that on me. I don't want it. I don't want it. And so I'll be like very prickly against anything that feels that way. And I also don't tend to sleep with men for really long.
But then, can I ask a follow-up question about that? Once you do, and the relationship is in that place, do you like being like pursued in the relationship?
Listen, she's
Sarah's nodding.
I am nodding. Yes. And so that's your point. Like, how do you get to the container where it feels safe to actually like play in some of that power and in those power dynamics? And as we're talking, I'm realizing that it takes me a long time.
Which is probably fine.
I don't know.
I'm having like this like flashback to my first boyfriend, who was white, by the way, from Two Rivers, Wisconsin.
Are you dating white men now?
I'm dating a white man now.
Oh, yeah. You told me about him. Okay.
Yeah, but also for context, like he's the second white man I've dated in 20 years. So not necessarily.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah. I hadn't dated a white man since like 2003. Yeah, and I was thinking about like why are reasons for that, and flashing back to my first boyfriend and how like it was really it was a damaging experience for me. I was 16. I had never done anything ever. This is like the first person I ever kissed, like whatever. And then I went to Two Rivers, which both my parents were like, please don't go.
Yeah.
And I went anyway because they were like, we're not going to stop you if you really want to go, but we think you're going to have a terrible time.
Was this for a dance for prom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was homecoming.
Yeah.
And we went, and it was a pretty terrible time for lots of different reasons.
And Two Rivers is like the neighboring town or whatever?
Oh, it's not even neighboring. It's like an hour and a half away or whatever. Like he lived in like really rural Wisconsin.
Okay.
And
it was like,
it's
like Hicksville or whatever. That was the...
Absolutely.
Okay, got it.
I was one of two people of color at this entire dance. The other one was a Brazilian exchange student, and I was very confused as to how she got to Two Rivers.
I bet she was too.
Yeah, it was a whole thing. And like the date itself, like it was a bad date, and that was fine. That's what it was. But the next morning, his father humiliated me over breakfast and made all these like hypersexualized comments, and like was basically asking me like what I did to like turn his son on and like all this stuff. And I was 16.
Yeah.
And that was like my first introduction to how people perceived me, whether or not it had any like basis in reality. Like there's an assumption that Black women have some sexual prowess or magic, but that it's also like there for the taking. You can just have it whenever you want. Like we don't have to like invest in you or do anything to get it. Like there's just all these like layers of things that make it really difficult and uncomfortable to engage with men sometimes.
Yeah.
Because to your point, like it is already like fraught enough. But then if you like have a feeling that not only does this person want to like sleep with me and that's like their entire goal, but they want to sleep with me and they're not willing to do any of the work to do that.
Right.
Like that feels crazy. And I think that's a lot of stuff that I've had to heal from in order to like be at a place where I'm like willing to date again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. But I wanted to like get back to like
Reagan. I'll bet you did.
I've got a whole list of questions for you. Like, yeah, blah, 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 monogamy.
Yeah.
So polyamory.
But also, like, that Two Rivers story is a doozy.
Yeah.
And...
Oh, we have to sit in it?
No, just for a minute. Just for a minute. So I can say, I'm so sorry. And
yeah, he was a dick.
he's a dick, and his father's
dad
a fucking piece of shit.
was part of, I think, through my 20s, like, my good girl response.
Of course.
Because I didn't want to be seen as, like, a slut or this or that or whatever. Like, you know, it just felt so, like, shameful.
Yeah.
And especially, like, to be so young.
Of course. Yeah. And that speaks to
the adultification of Black women.
the adultification of Black women, the experience that I'm having, which is power imbalance, but not that kind of layered power imbalance, and never that kind of layered power imbalance. And yeah.
Yeah, and just to come back to what you were saying originally about like the first post you saw from Anwar, what he was saying was like, there are places where this stuff isn't the same. Some of this, like, you won't have this same experience.
And it's true.
Yeah.
And I've known it to be true. I think that's part of what has always really drawn me about Anwar is like whether it's like funny or, wild, like he says lots of things that like, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that he actually said that out loud. But then when you sit with it, and you think about it, it's true.
Yeah.
Or there's like some deep truth to it. And with this, like, I've definitely been doing this on my own. Like people, if you ever wonder why I be traveling so much, vacation.
And that externalizing of the power dynamics and of the things that are happening and that have been, when you describe that story of being 16, all the ways that you internalize that as something that you had done wrong or something that you had to live with alone or something that you had to navigate alone. And
definitely couldn't talk about it. Like, I was going to come back and tell my parents, yeah, you were totally right. That guy's a dick.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I should have never gone.
Well, yeah. And I guess speaking of sitting in things, I think it's worthwhile to just sit in like that, what you're revealing about like how fucking racist our country and context is, like sexist and racist, and how those things are.
Which I think it shows you kind of why, like, I'm not like super like, yeah, I'm trying to date white dudes. Like, no, not really.
Or trying to date like without a strategy, a plan, and a way to actually like voice and externalize some of these things so they can be engaged with in a way that's transparent and feels a little safer.
All of that.
All of that.
And this specific white dude is passing a lot of these tests.
Yeah.
Really. When do I get to meet him?
I've seen pictures.
Probably when I get back.
Does he do karaoke?
Yes.
Okay.
He also
We wanted to go to...
We can go to karaoke.
All right.
He's got
We can
great
go to
facial
Lottie's.
hair too.
We can go to Lottie's.
Okay. Yeah, I heard about the facial hair already.
Yeah, he's a really cool person. And I'm glad I got to meet him.
Yeah.
And it was a real, like, maybe I wouldn't because I have been filtering so hard. So that's another thing that, like, as a part of my strategy is, like, allowing the filter to do its work.
Yeah.
So, like, casting a wide net, but then coming back with, like, boundaries and structure and questions and things that, like, help you weed out who's going to be a good fit and who's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But blah, blah, blah. Y'all like, so like, you're over there like, we're going to ask you
the podcast. I guess we're done, everybody. Good job.
Yeah, we know how to turn it around.
But I feel like you want to talk about power struggles. This is the power
This is the
struggle.
power struggle. Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
asking the question?
Yeah.
I'm like, y'all didn't invite me over here to not get grilled.
Right, okay, but can I go to the bathroom first?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, she's running away.
Thank you so much for listening to Mistakes Were Made. You can find us on all the podcast platforms. You can find us on Instagram at MistakesCast. You can email us mistakescast@gmail.com, and we will be back in a couple weeks with our next full episode. Thanks.